The Adidas Adios Pro 4 versus the Nike Alphafly 3. Two shoes that have surprisingly similar performance, but get there in very different ways. How do you choose which one is right for you? Arguably, at the end of 24, going into 2025, these are the two best super shoes that you can buy based on results and overall performance. And surprisingly, as I said, they're very similar to each other, but they get there in very different ways, meaning that they're very much using the tech stacks of the brands. Nike with Zoom X, the Zoom Air units, Atom Knit, Adidas with their new Lightstrike Pro formula, with their Energy Rods 2.0 and this new upper. These two shoes feel remarkably similar, and which one you're going to like is really going to come down to a couple key choices. And as always with my versus videos, let's start with the specs. And in this case, this is something you're going to hear quite a few times in this video. These two shoes are nearly identical. From a stack height and weight standpoint, they are basically the same shoe. The biggest difference, and you will feel this on foot, is that the Adios Pro 4 has a 6mm drop, and because of the softness of the new Lightstrike Pro foam in that shoe, the real feel of that is 4 to 6, depending on how you're weighting the shoe. But in the Alphafly 3, that's an 8mm drop, and it really does feel like an 8mm drop. It has that classic Nike up on your toes feel, and that is very prevalent in the Alphafly 3. The Adidas Adios Pro 4 has a full Lightstrike Pro midsole. That is the new formulation for 2025 of Lightstrike Pro. It's still a supercritical TPEE foam. It's just much softer, much more bouncy, and much more resilient. There's more energy return in this foam. And we have the return of the Carbon Energy Rods 2.0 from heel to toe. These same carbon energy rods that were in the previous version, the Adios Pro 3. We also have a revised forefoot rocker location. It's moved to the 60% mark of the shoe, which makes it a just much more aggressive forefoot rocker. It suits higher cadence runners and forefoot strikers much better than the previous model. In the Alphafly 3, we have Nike's full Zoom X midsole with two Air Zoom AirPods in the forefoot of the shoe with a carbon fiber fly plate heel to toe in that shoe. And overall, I would say this shoe also has a very aggressive forefoot rocker, which again, combined with that drop, really puts you up on your toes to really maximize all that energy return in the AirPods and all the Zoom X under the forefoot of this shoe. And the ride characteristics of these two shoes are also fairly identical. The little graphs here that I have are basically two ways of me articulating pretty much the same thing. The Adios Pro 4 feels bouncy, there's a lot of sink and a lot of return, and the Alphafly 3 feels very bottomless. It feels like you could sink forever in that shoe, but you always get a ton of pop off the toe in that shoe. The resiliency of both these shoes is absolutely outstanding. And moving to the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, this is probably the one place where there is a significant difference between these two shoes. In the Adios Pro 4, we have Adidas's new Light Traction outsole, which is a CPU outsole or a cast polyurethane outsole, which gives you most of the grip of the traditional Continental rubber outsole, but at about a third of the weight. It is a significantly much more lightweight material, and it's a much more compliant material to the ground, so you have a much softer foot feel in the Adios Pro 4 than you would with a traditional rubber outsole. You do have a little piece of rubber under the big toe in the Adios Pro 4, which is something you do notice, especially on wet to dry transitions. But overall, the outsole on the Adios Pro 4 is a very, very good outsole. On the Nike Alphafly 3, we have the traditional rubber outsole. We have Nike waffle in the forefoot with those two pucks under the AirPods for really engaging the ground first with the AirPods, and small rubber pieces on the heel that give enough protection, especially on the lateral side. From a width standpoint, while the Adios Pro 4 is wider in the forefoot, it's not significantly wider. Where you do begin to notice the differences in the width of the shoe is in the heel. The Nike Alphafly 3 is considerably wider, especially on the medial side. That large medial heel flare really makes a difference, especially for pronators, where in the Adios Pro 4, because you have that large cutout right under the arch of the foot and that pad on the medial side and the heel is also very soft. I would say for pronation, the Adios Pro 4 is just not an option. If you are an overpronator, you kind of need to forget that the Adios Pro 4 even exists, because it's just not going to work. The shoe's just going to collapse inward for you. The stability for heel strikers, I'm going to say, is higher in the Alphafly 3. It's okay in the Adios Pro 4, but it's not what it was in the Adios Pro 3. But that midfoot section collapsing for, I think, midfoot strikers and people who pronate in the Adios Pro 4 could be a big issue. You don't have that problem in the Alphafly 3. And moving to the uppers of these two shoes, and starting with the Adios Pro 4, this is a completely new upper on the Adios Pro 4 from the Adios Pro 3. All of the issues with the Pro 3 are now resolved in this shoe. The weird postings that were in the Adios Pro 3 at the base of the eyelet chain that caused a lot of problems around the knuckle of the toes for a lot of people, that's now gone. The lace bite issue is mostly resolved, and the rough cellar mesh upper that was on the Pro 3 is now replaced by this very nice synthetic textile that's very compliant to the foot, wraps around the foot very nicely. This is not as lightweight as what you found on the Evo 1, but it is somewhere in between this and the Adios Pro 3 as far as durability, and this should be an exceptional upper. I talked a lot about this upper in my review of the shoe, link in the description if you want that, but this is a upper that fits definitely like a race fit, and this new textile wraps around the foot, but it's never constricting. There's a couple technologies in this upper, mostly the sling launch system, which we've seen in Adizero shoes for years. That's meant to pull the heel inward and really wrap it around the back of the heel to give you a good lockdown. There's also a new system in here called the light lock system, which is a band that runs along the eyelet chain into the heel, which brings the midfoot into the heel. So between the sling launch and the light lock system, it really kind of wraps around your foot and gives you an exceptional lockdown in this shoe. The toe box volume is actually very good. There's a very stout toe box bumper here that keeps the material up off the toe. And the width of this shoe, I'm going to say it's not as wide as the Adios Pro 3 was. I don't think it's any more narrow. It's just the way this upper textile works and the way it's bonded to the midsole. I just think it pinches in just a little bit more. Again, it's not constricting. It just wraps around your foot in a much better way. It very much is a race fit, which is what I would expect on a super shoe of this tier. Moving to the Nike Alphafly 3, we have Nike's new Atom Knit 3.0 upper on this, which is a very soft synthetic textile on this shoe, even more lightweight than previous Atom Knits. It's a type of fly knit, but again, this is even more open weave, but it's very structural where it gives you lockdown where you need it and allows flex where you want it. So it's a very, very soft, very compliant upper to the foot. This is a booty style upper, which is one of the big differences between this and the Adios Pro 4. But this booty is very soft in the tongue area. It's got a very soft, compliant area around the Achilles flare, and it just wraps around your foot very, very well. This is a race fit, but I'm going to say it's not quite as wrapped around the foot as the Adios Pro 4. But the lockdown on this shoe for a booty style upper is exceptionally good. I was actually very surprised every time I run in this shoe just how good this upper is, because booty style uppers have never really worked for me, but this one really works for my high volume, high arch foot. From a width standpoint, I would consider this fairly generous for a Nike. It's not wide, but it is wider than the Vaporfly 3, but it feels very similar in width to the Adios Pro 4 to me. The one difference is that the toe box in the Alphafly 3 is a little bit more squared off. Just a little bit. As you can see between these two shoes, they're very similar toe box tapers, but there's just a little bit more squared offness around the big toe in this shoe, which just gives you a lot more room. The toe box volume in this shoe is lower than the Adios Pro 4, but the toe bumper keeps the material off of the toe, and the Atom Knit material is much more lightweight anyway, that I don't get any sort of toenail or toe trauma in either one of these shoes. And I have toes that are very, very sensitive to that. These are two super shoes that don't give me any sort of toe or toenail issues whatsoever. From a fit standpoint, I went true to size in both these shoes. These are both US men's size 9, which is what I wear in both brands and pretty much every other running shoe. And I have no issues with fit in either one of these shoes. As I said, they're both race fits, and that's what I expect from a super shoe. I would not recommend going up or down half a size in either one of these shoes, and I think that's especially important with both of these shoes because you want to make sure that you get the technology in these shoes, the AirPods and the curve of the fly plate in the Alphafly, and the big ball of foam and the curve of the energy rods in the Adios Pro 4. You want to get those in the right place under your foot in relationship to the ball of your foot. If you're going up or down half a size, that's going to move that around and sometimes put that in the wrong place. Though I think for either of these, if you like a larger fit or a longer fit, meaning you like maybe a full thumb's width between the front of your big toe and the front of the shoe, you could go up or should go up half a size in both these shoes. But if you like a true race fit and you like them very close fitting, go true to size with either one of these shoes. Moving to the midsole construction of these two shoes and starting with the Adios Pro 4, we have a full-length two-piece Light Strike Pro midsole with the Energy Rods 2.0 sandwiched between those two pieces. This is the new formulation of Light Strike Pro for 2025. It is much softer, much more bouncy, and has higher resilience than the previous version of Light Strike Pro found in the Adios Pro 3. The ride profile or the feel of this foam is different than the previous generation of Light Strike Pro. This is much more sink and then bound out, where the former version, or Light Strike Pro Classic, was more of a compression and spring out. So it's a very different feel. This foam is much closer to Zoom X that Nike uses. And moving to the Nike Alphafly 3, we also have a two-piece Zoom X midsole on this with a Nike carbon fiber fly plate sandwiched in between those, and two Air Zoom units in the forefoot of the shoe sitting directly under the plate. So there's Zoom X carbon fiber plate, then the Air Zoom units between the plate and the ground, giving this shoe a very resilient ride. You're getting all of the compression of the Zoom X foam, which is very, very soft and very high resiliency, very high energy return, and you're getting the compression of the Air Zoom units, which also have a very high compression and high resiliency. So there is a ton of energy return in this shoe, and the more you load this up and the more you're loading up all the material on the forefoot of the shoe is really what's propelling this shoe forward. This shoe has a lot more going on in the midsole, and you do feel that underfoot, but again, it provides a very similar ride to what is actually in the Adios Pro 4. And moving to the ride of these two shoes, as I've already said multiple times, the performance of these two shoes is very, very much the same. It's almost to the point when Adidas was tuning the Adios Pro 4 and they were figuring out what is the performance characteristic of this shoe going to be, they went and bought a pair of Nike Alphafly 3s, and they figured this is the benchmark we need to hit. And that's exactly what they did here. They made a shoe that feels nearly identical in performance to the Alphafly 3. However, the feel on foot and the way these two shoes run, that's where there's some differences, and those differences are going to really determine which one of these two shoes you prefer. And to explain that difference, I need to start with the Alphafly 3. Now, the Alphafly platform in general has always felt very mechanical, and that has been really down to these Air Zoom units. They're not foam. They have resilience and compression, but they just have a very different cadence. They just feel different than foam. Plus, with the past versions of the Alphafly, you had that decoupled forefoot and heel, which also made the shoe just much more mechanical feeling, just much more blocky underfoot. With the Alphafly 3, Nike solved a lot of that with the continuous midsole, and they really worked on the geometry to make this shoe feel as natural and smooth as possible. And they did a brilliant job. This shoe now runs very smoothly and very naturally. It doesn't feel like a crazy contraption on your foot like previous Alphaflys did. But the Air Zoom units do still have a slight mechanical feel. You can feel that there's something else under your foot than foam. Now, some people really respond to that, some people really like that, and there's no doubt there's a ton of energy return in this shoe, especially when you're loading everything up. But that feel in the cadence of how that compresses and decompresses really can be something you either really like or you don't like at all. But in the Adios Pro 4, since you don't have the Air Zoom units in the forefoot of the shoe, you have a much smoother all foam feeling. This shoe does not have that mechanical feel that the Alphafly 3 can have for some runners. So if you ever ran in the Alphafly 3 and you loved the bounce, you loved the injury return of that shoe, but you just didn't like the mechanicalness of the Air Zoom units, this is going to be your shoe because this has almost the exact same feel without any of that mechanical feeling. Another big difference of the Adios Pro 4 over the Nike Alphafly 3 is the feel on the ground as well. This shoe is just a much softer feel on the ground, a much more compliant feel to the ground, and that's coming from really two things. The first is this CPU outsole. It just has a much softer, more compliant feel to the ground. If you've ever run in a shoe like a classic Hoka that has a lot of exposed foam and not a lot of rubber on it, you know how soft that shoe feels on the ground? The Adios Pro 4 has that feel. But also because of the energy rods in this shoe, which are rods, they flex independently with the metatarsals of the foot. This shoe also has a very soft feel across the width of the shoe, where you can really feel the shoe flex. And what that gives you in the Adios Pro 4 is a lot more proprioceptive feedback. It's not ground feel, but you're aware of where your foot is in relationship to the ground. And you can understand if you're on a very cambered surface or not, or a rough surface. You just have a lot more feedback, and you feel the surface a lot more in the shoe. Again, it's not ground feel. You're not feeling it into your foot. You just know where your foot is in space. And some runners will really like that because they really miss that feeling in all these high stack super shoes. This shoe definitely has that feel. And in the Alphafly 3, because it is a carbon fiber plate in this shoe, and that needs to be there to really give you the ability to leverage these two independent air zoom units in the forefoot of the shoe, this shoe just doesn't really have any ground feel or really any sort of proprioceptive feedback where you are in space. That's fine, but I think that adds to sort of the mechanical feeling of this shoe. And this shoe, again, has really resolved a lot of the classic Alphafly feel, but still, it's not all foam, and it is a ride that will take some getting used to if you've never run in the air zoom units before. Another way to explain the differences between these two shoes is with my performance matrix. So if we put both these shoes on here and we start with the Adios Pro 4, you can see that I think the real sweet spot of this is the red area in this range. That is threshold pace, really marathon pace. But the Adios Pro 4 has a lot of high end. It has a lot of that max effort. So if you need to kick in a race, you need to sprint somewhere, you need to catch up with the pack, this shoe has a lot of max effort legs in it, making it really well suited really for any type of road racing distance. And I think on the easier side, it does steady running really well, and it feels very natural given how soft the foam is. But if we put the Alphafly 3 on here, I'm not joking when I say these two shoes have the exact same performance. I honestly cannot make the Alphafly 3 feel any different. It really covers all of the same bases in the exact same way. I think it has a little bit more top end, especially if you're a forefoot striker who can really efficiently load the air zoom units in the forefoot of the Alphafly 3. But overall, both of these shoes cover the same thing. You're going to get a lot of really core threshold or marathon pace effort. That's what they're tuned to do. You can sprint, you can kick in these shoes, and they're going to work well for steady running. I'm not going to say easy running, but for training and doing sort of those long runs where you need to do the rest periods between marathon effort pace, these two shoes are going to do exceptionally well with that. So what's the verdict here? Which one of these two shoes am I going to pick? Well, it's a hard choice. And I'm going to say right now that I can't really clearly pick between these. I've had this shoe for most of the year. I've done a lot of running, a lot of workouts in this shoe. This shoe has really surprised me. This shoe is fairly new. It's not even really released in a lot of markets. And I think I'm going to be spending a lot more time in 2025 in this shoe. However, if I had to go race any road racing distance tomorrow, 5K, 10K, half marathon, full marathon, I would be doing it in this shoe because the Alphafly 3 has really just surprised me all year, and I'm very much accustomed to ZoomX foam. Now that's a big compliment for this shoe because I have always been a Vaporfly runner, but now this shoe has basically replaced the Vaporfly for me for really any type of road racing. However, in 2025, we have a Vaporfly 4 coming out, so it'll be interesting to see where that slots in with these two shoes. But if this is the only shoe I had to go race in right now, I would not be disappointed. As I pointed out many times, these shoes both have the same performance, they just get there in very different ways. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.